There's no doubt human resources is a very dynamic department in any company. If you're sitting in a human resources department, all kinds of things can be going on. Somebody could come down from the management board and they want to deal with a specific aspect of human resources policy in the company. Somebody rings up from the global headquarters and wants to clarify a point of employment law. One of the employees in the human resources department is having a problem with the payroll. And then somebody comes in and she's crying because she's had some kind of problem and some kind of misunderstanding with her boss. There's all kinds of things going on. And a human resources department, what happens in a human resources department can really depend on the company. It can depend on the sector that the company is in. It can depend on what kind of company it is. For example, there's a difference between a manufacturing company and a service-related company, or it could really depend on the size of the company. And the reason companies have human resources is because they need to manage the people that are working in the company or the people that could potentially work in your company. And people are an asset. And these people have to be managed, and they contribute to the success and the development of the company. Now, there's no doubt in your life that you'll have some kind of contact with human resources. Even if it's a short contact and you have to deal with them when you're applying for a job, having a job interview, or starting a new job. Or it could be that in your career that you end up working in a human resources department. Now, on a business English course, it's important that you have an understanding of the basic functions in a human resources department. And here I'd like to run through 12 different functions. So let's get started. Now, the first thing that people often think about when they think about human resources is recruitment. And it's certainly an important function of HR. Now, recruitment is about hiring new staff into your company. And it's all about going through the recruitment process. So it will involve identifying the needs for personnel in your company. This will involve talking to all kinds of people in the company. And then you will need to draw up things like person specifications. Now, a person specification is giving the attributes and the characteristics of the people that you need for this particular role in the company. There could be also job descriptions, which is a description of the job and the functions within the job. And then it will also involve advertising the position or the vacancy that is free. Then candidates will send in what are called their applications, maybe some kind of application letter, some kind of application portfolio, and they'll send in what is called in American English a resume, or in British English a curriculum vitae. And then one of the functions of HR, maybe with other people in the company, so if this is a post in marketing, maybe you need to deal with the marketing manager or the marketing director as well. But what you need to do then is go through all the applications and you need to screen the applications. When you've screened the applications, then you'll draw up some kind of short list, and this will be a short list of candidates that are usually they're invited to the company for some kind of job interview. These days, sometimes first job interviews are also done online, or it'll be some kind of job assessment. Some companies run assessment centres. These could go on for 2 or 3 hours, or maybe even all day in the company. It could be then that a further shortlist is drawn up and another round of interviews is done, maybe with 2 or 3 candidates, and then finally a candidate is chosen for the job. And then that candidate has to be offered the job, a contract of employment has to be drawn up, and any other agreements as well have to be finalised. And when it comes to selecting candidates, well, companies are they're looking for the best candidate for the job. It's somebody who's really well qualified for the job. Depending on the job, it will be somebody who's very well experienced. but you'll also be looking for people who fit into the company that you're working for. And this will be to do with the department that they're working in. You know, do the people in that department, do they feel comfortable with this particular candidate? Do you think this candidate will feel comfortable in the department, and will they fit into the corporate culture? This brings us then logically then to a second function of HR, and this is onboarding and orientation. So you've selected the best candidate for the job, you've offered them the job, they've accepted the job, and you've signed the contract. And then the person starts in the job, and the person needs to get acclimatized with the company and with the people that they're working with. And there's some kind of process in which HR helps them to get familiar with the company and all the procedures that are there. And this is called the induction process. You need to make the candidate feel welcome in the company, that you want to work with this person, and you want to get them familiar with all the policies and the procedures that you have in the company. And maybe some kind of training or development is part of this process. And then this brings us on then to the next aspect, or the next function of human resources, and this is training and development. And again, depending on the company, it could be in the human resources, there is a person or a small group of people who are specifically responsible for doing human resources development. And human resources development is about organising all the training and all the workshops and all the seminars that the company needs in order to keep its people up to date with all the knowledge that they need in order to do the jobs that they do. And these workshops and seminars, they could be arranged internally. Maybe a senior manager in the company could do a workshop on a specific aspect of the job they have a lot of experience with. Or in many cases as well, you will be dealing with external companies and external suppliers and negotiating the contents and the fees that are paid for these workshops and seminars. As I said, it's linked to the company and the needs of the company, but also training and development. It could be a specific program that's built in the company, and there are different steps in the training. It could also be linked to something called performance management, which I have dealt with in another video, but I'll put the link at the end of this video and I'll put it down in the comments below as well. But in performance management, individuals might have been set individual goals for their development. And these days as well, we should also think with training and development, we should think about coaching programs and mentoring programs as well. So then we come on to the next function of HR, which is dealing with compensation and benefits. And this is really to do with things like salaries, perks, benefits, and some kinds of incentives. So if we look at salaries, so HR will pay within different salary structures, and these salary structures are maybe agreed in the company, maybe it's some kind of industry where outside tariffs are agreed for that particular industry. In order to get the best talent in the company, maybe salaries are negotiable, and the salaries are negotiated with the employees as they come into the company. And as well as salaries, then you get things like different kinds of perks and benefits. And perks, there is a slight difference. Perks are all those little extra things you get in the company. So when you go in the company, there might be things like free gym access, there might be free meals in the canteen, there might be some kind of company car, and so on and so on. If we look at benefits, this will be things like maybe there's some kind of investment program that you can have where you get shares in the company. There's a retirement plan that you can join, or in many countries there's some kind or different kinds of health insurance. And incentives are really about little rewards that you can give people. They're things that you can give people in order to help keep them motivated in their job and to reach different targets in their job. And rewards can be different things. They can be bonuses, they can be money, but they can be all little extra things that you give people. Maybe it's just a simple event that you have in the company and you recognize people for doing certain things. Or in one company I know, the boss would take, if they reach their targets, the boss would take people on a short weekend holiday at the end of every year. So this is compensation and benefits. And then we come on to the next function of HR, which is policies and compliance. Now, policies will be in line with what's called labour law or employment law. And when we looked at welcoming a new employee into the company, then we talked about getting that worker familiar with the policies in the company. Now, certain policies that companies have, or the way that they employ people, or the way that they hire and they fire people, this has to be in line with employment law. And this can cover things like harassment, human rights, diversity, race issues, and things like this. It can also cover things like health and safety as well. For example, if you think about working in a company where there are very dangerous chemicals, then there will be certain law around dealing with those chemicals, laws to do with health and safety. Then we come on to grievances and complaints. And of course, when you're working in a company, not everything goes in the best way possible in every circumstance. And sometimes there are disagreements and there are misunderstandings. And one of the jobs of HR can be resolving these different complaints and these different grievances that people have. And this will involve dealing with different people, with different levels of people in the organisation. And the responsibility of HR will be to resolve these conflicts, to reach some kind of resolution. And the role of HR will be to facilitate discussions, to act as some kind of mediator in trying to resolve these different conflicts that are going on in the company. And if some kind of action has to be taken after the complaint, then they will be responsible for taking that action. Now, connected to grievances and complaints, then we will come on to one of the next functions of HR, is to do with disciplinary action. And this will be, again, when something has gone wrong or somebody has done something wrong within the company. And it will be about going through the correct policies and procedures that you need to go through in order to take disciplinary action. And HR has to be seen to be, again, compliant with the law, and they have to be seen to be fair in taking this disciplinary action. And if we talk about disciplinary action, well, first of all, it could be just talking to people, but then there could be some kind of warning systems. So different countries might have different laws about how many warnings you have to give people, and if you have to put those warnings into writing and when they have to be given, or maybe even about the form in which these warnings are made. In the worst case, it could be about firing somebody because they've done something wrong. So you have to give the person their notice for the job. And then we come on to the next function, which is to do with talent management and succession planning. And talent management is about keeping high potentials in your company and about attracting high potentials to your company. And these days, talent management can be really important in certain areas of business because of this global war for talent. And talent management is all about it's identifying, making sure that people have all the resources that they need to do a job, and not only that they can do their job, but they can succeed in that job. And it's a question of identifying high potential people within your company, and then giving them the resources in order that they can develop within the company and reach the potential. Succession planning is all about, it's about future needs, and it's not only just reacting when a manager comes to you and says we've got a job vacancy, but it's also looking into the future and looking at the future needs of the company and the industry and what kind of talent should be needed in the company. Now, talent management is linked to employer branding. And employer branding is certainly very much connected to talent management, but I don't want to deal with it here because I have dealt with it in another video. And again, I'll give you the link at the end of this video, and I'll give it in the comments the comments below. Now, the next function is to do with analytics and reporting, and this is all to do with data. Now, if you think about HR, they hold and they have access to all different kinds of data, and I've just noted down a few things here. So there are things like the employee records, workforce metrics, turnover rates, things to do with staff fluctuation, data on recruitment, performance indicator, future staffing needs, and the employment the employees on benefit programs. And HR will have all this data, and one of their jobs will be about managing this data and analysing the data and reporting on the data that they have. And then connected to this, then I would like to come on to maybe a final function, and that's dealing with technology and systems. And again, in collecting this data and managing this data, then HR needs to be familiar with technology, and they need to know certain programs in order to do their job. One of the typical things, for example, in HR is managing the payroll, and the payroll runs through a system, and HR needs to know how this system works so that people are paid at the right time and they're paid with the right amount of money. So this was a general broad outline of the functions of HR, and in this description I've tried to give you many of the concepts and the vocabulary that you need in order to deal with HR. But when we talk about HR, I think another point that I would add to this is to think about the qualities and the characteristics that an HR person needs. And if you think about all these different functions, then HR is a function where you have to deal with people. And an HR person is somebody who is a people person. Now, like many management function, they'll have to have good communication skills, but HR people as well, they need to be very sensitive. They need to have a good deal of empathy. They need to have high levels of emotional intelligence. They have to have sensitivity, and they have to have a lot of integrity as well. And if you think about things that they have to do, like dealing with complaints and grievances, well, if you have a grievance, you might be a very, very junior member of staff who's making a complaint about somebody who's right up at the top of the company and is a director of the company. And you have to deal with all these different peoples within the organization. HR, we've talked about, they have to deal with people's salaries, they have to deal with people's problems, and they have a lot of personal information about people, and they have to be able to keep information very, very confidential. HR people as well, because of all the things that are happening in HR and all the things that can suddenly happen, they have to be, I think, very adaptable, and they have to be very flexible. If we think about the situation that happened very recently with the pandemic, then HR was one of the functions in the company that really had to deal with this problem with the pandemic when people couldn't come into work and they suddenly had to adapt to working from home. Then HR had to deal with this and all the problems connected with this. HR people as well, of course, then there's the other side of the job. They've got to be very knowledgeable. They've got to know about HR. They've got to have their hands on employment law. They've got to have a lot of experience in dealing with questions in different companies. They've got to be very strategic as well. They've got to be able to do planning. They've got to do analysis, and they've got to really think about the future needs of the company. So that was it for this video, looking at the general functions of a human resources department and getting you familiar with that, and helping you to get to grips with the concepts and vocabulary that you need. I've also given you a few details about the qualities and the characteristics that I think a human resources manager needs. Now, in a business English course, we're dealing with this because one of the things that you're required to do in a business English course is get to know how companies work and what happens in different departments. Now, this was the human resources department, but I've also done videos on talking about what happens in the marketing department and what's happened in the finance department, and I'll give you the link for that. So I'd like to thank you very much for listening to this video. Please like, please subscribe, please have a look at my other videos, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.